it all on WKOK Sunrise on News Radio 1070 WKOK and WKOK.com.
And welcome on board WKOK Sunrise. We have a guest in this morning to talk about stuff that we don't usually talk about except when she comes up here. I guess that's the issue, right? You're the person who brought all this up, and we hardly ever discuss it otherwise, right?
That's true.
All right. Well, Cindy Moyer is back, and she's a highly credentialed individual, an expert in the topic of talking about end-of-life issues and death issues. She's the co-owner of a company called Caring Choices, so that's a startup business around here, and she's the co-creator of the Elephant in the Room. I'm going to call it a game, not quite a game per se, but certainly a real conversation starter that folks use. Refresh folks' memory about Elephant in the Room. Define it real quick for us, please.
Elephant in the Room is a set of 96 cards for people to sit around their kitchen table with family and friends and discuss healthcare choices that they may face as they grow older and health changes.
Right, so aging too. I talked about end of life, but just aging, 60 plus or 55 plus, something like that might be where to have these. And you go through the game and it has individual cards. You take one out and it may say, is your will up to date, or does your will call about, what might one of the cards say?
Well, one of my favorite questions in Elephant in the Room is, if you were incapacitated, who would you want taking care of you, and who could do that? So many times family members think, I'm just going to stay home and my kids will take care of me and that'll be great. And that's okay. That works sometimes, but it often doesn't. People lose their independence and they need more care, and then they need to find other placements. So it's really a thought-provoking exercise for people to go through the Elephant in the Room.
All right, and you cite statistics that you mentioned to us before that most people, the vast majority of people, want to die quietly at home, but the vast majority of people don't die that way. They die in hospitals and healthcare facilities and nursing facilities.
That's
and so
true,
on.
Yes. And even Dr. Gawande in his book and all of his research shows that 70% of us want to die at home in our beds surrounded by family and loved ones and peacefully go to sleep. And we know that 70% of Americans are dying in hospitals, in ICUs, and in nursing homes where they're not with loved ones typically.
All right. Well, you have some events coming up. You're part of some events coming up. I'm just going to read the first two paragraphs if I can, because it's so packed full of details that I don't want to miss one. And that is that coming up on September 7th and October 20th, Caring Choices, that's your company, and Evangelical Community Hospital are holding free community screenings of the documentary Being Mortal. It's Wednesday, September 7th at the Campus Theater and Thursday, October 20th at Isaac's Auditorium at Susquehanna University. Both events from 6 to 8 p.m., free and open to the public, correct?
That's right.
And Dr. Catherine O'Neill of Bucknell University Student Health Center and Jan Reichert Brown, PhD of Susquehanna University's Healthcare Minors Studies are co-sponsoring the screenings in Lewisburg and Selinsgrove. After the screening, audience members will participate in a guided discussion on how to take concrete steps to identify and communicate wishes about end-of-life goals and preferences. So there's that. Now, what's going to happen at these events? Tell us about the documentary and the discussion.
Well, the documentary follows Dr. Gawande's very important book called Being Mortal that he came out with in 2014. And then in February of 2015, PBS's Frontline did a documentary following him around to some visits with patients and their families in the hospital, and then talking with other physicians in other hospitals about how to have conversations with your doctor, with family and loved ones. And then the Hospice Foundation of America this year released the documentary to screening hosts across the country so that we could bring this documentary free to public screenings and then have public open dialogue about end-of-life choices, healthcare choices. And, we focus on end of life, but you can have a tragedy befall you at any time. So it's really talking about healthcare choices if and when something happens to you.
All right, and this is a documentary. I saw probably about half of it so far, previewing it. Very frank conversations that you're sitting in on, doctor-patient conversations, and you have the Dr. Gawande, Dr. Atul Gawande, is also going through his own discovery here. So add that layer on it, please.
He is. I believe while he was writing this book, his own father was diagnosed with cancer. And his father was a surgeon like himself. His mother's a surgeon. So you had three highly educated surgeons dealing with these decisions, and they hadn't ever really talked about these things either. Being surgeons, they recognized the prognosis wouldn't be good. So they did do some treatment, but it wasn't helpful. And he had a couple of experiences with doctors in this documentary that you'll see where he questions what the doctors were telling his father, who was also a medical professional. So they struggled with these decisions, but then his father really took the bull by the horns and talked about what he wanted and what he didn't want, and ways that he wanted to be and ways that he didn't want to be. And in the documentary, Dr. Gawande says that his father wanted to be social, and if he could no longer be social, then he didn't want to be. So it was really helpful for Dr. Gawande and his mother and his sister to hear that from his father and have his wishes to carry out.
What are doctors doing wrong?
Well, I don't like to say that doctors are doing anything wrong. I think they're not trained well to have these conversations. Doctors and medical professionals are trained to cure people and to treat diseases and make people feel better. And anyone who's ever tried to talk about healthcare choices at the end of life knows that it's daunting and it's difficult to do. And I think doctors generally don't want to disappoint their patients, and they don't want to scare their patients. So they really want to try to buffer everything. But as Dr. Gawande is famous for saying, hope is not a plan. So you really need to plan for things that are going to come up.
All right, and there is an opportunity for folks to learn more about how to have these conversations, these frank discussions. And, right, you don't want to say that doctors get it wrong, but even Dr. Gawande said he had been talking to his patients with what, not false statements, but undue optimism and just not sort of realistic conversations.
Yeah, I think doctors really like to be optimistic. And we know that, if you're positive and you have a positive attitude, especially we hear that with people going through cancer, it makes your treatment and your recovery a little bit better. Certainly, I'm a positive person. I want to keep people up too, but we do need to talk about these things so that it's not so difficult for family members going through these things to make decisions. If you've talked about it and you have an idea of what your parent or your loved one wants, it's a lot easier to make decisions on their behalf.
PBS's Frontline showed the documentary, and now they make it available for anybody to watch, Being Mortal, but it will be shown at 2 upcoming events, and then it'll be followed by a guided discussion September 7th at the Campus Theater in Lewisburg and October 20th at Isaacs Auditorium at Susquehanna University. And in both cases, you'll be present, correct?
Yes.
You'll be there, and then staff from EVAN and staff from, an individual from Susquehanna University's faculty will be there as well to help make sure that folks try to communicate to try to encourage people to communicate. You always use the word that we want to communicate your wishes. What does that mean exactly?
Well, like in the case with Dr. Gawande's father, he wanted to remain social. So if he hadn't ever said that to his family, they wouldn't have had any idea that when he was no longer able to speak, he wouldn't want to be in that condition. In my own case, my mother always said that if she could live to be 71, she'd feel happy, and she lived to be 71, so that was good for her. But I always knew from my mom what she could tolerate and what she couldn't with her own disease process, and she was always afraid of suffocating. She had a lung disease, so we always talked about those things. And when we met with her doctor and then the hospice team, they assured us that they had ways that they could manage that so that she wouldn't feel that symptom. So I think just knowing what she wanted and what she didn't want made it easier for me to advocate for her. And I think that is what is true for everybody who can have these conversations with their loved ones and make these plans and get their decisions in place. It makes it easier to just then enjoy whatever life you have left without focusing on the next decision to be made or focusing on the crisis at hand.
What are people's wishes? Woman was concerned about, she wished that she would not die of suffocation, so that was a fear more than maybe a wish. But what are some other wishes that people have? Well,
you often see people want to make sure they see their next grandson born, or they want to take the family on a vacation to the beach, or they just want to have friends over for tea one more time. It can be very simple gatherings that people focus on, that they want to be present for. So in order to do that, you need to manage the treatments, you need to manage the pain and symptom management, and you really just need to try to make them comfortable and have as much quality of life as they can in whatever time they have remaining.
Why are we so bad at talking about death? We talk about other inevitabilities, like all people shower every day or shower at some point. So, boy, bathrooms and hygiene is talked about and brought up all the time, and every house has a shower. Everybody's going to die, but nobody talks about it.
I think everybody is just afraid. I think there's a great fear component with death because we don't know what's going to happen to us. We don't know if it's going to be full of pain and suffering. We don't want to think of losing our loved ones or leaving our loved ones. It's difficult to say goodbye to your son moving across the country, let alone contemplating a death. But I think as we have more conversations, it'll become easier to talk more and openly about these things that are really important. And, death is just the circle of life. We have a lot of celebration. There's a lot of people around when babies are born. We need to give people who are dying that same kind of comfort and same kind of, I guess comfort is the best word.
Right. Well, there seems to be a peace of mind. In the documentary, there's an individual who talks about a peace of mind as after having said goodbye to a wide range of people close to her, that made her feel better. Not that there's nothing to feel good about in there, but there's a contentedness. How about that goes with that?
That's a good word. And we've seen that same kind of contented expression from people who have talked about things and made their wishes known to their family and put documents in place. And then they kind of breathe a sigh of relief that, I've done that. And now we don't have to worry about what's going to come up. This documentary has some excellent interviews with patients while they're going through their end-of-life process, as well as the husband of one of Dr. Gawande's patients who did die, and he reflects on things they might have done differently had they known that they were going to have such short time.
All right. Anything else to add to this? I'll repeat the dates before we're done here in a second, but anything you would like to add to our conversation?
I would just like to publicly thank Dr. Catherine Giorgini and Evan Hospital, as well as Dr. O'Neill and Dr. Reichard Brown, for sponsoring these events with us and opening these up to the public. I think it's an important free public event, and I encourage everyone to come out to one or the other venues.
Yeah, Being Mortal, Wednesday, September 7th at the Campus Theater from 6 to 8 p.m. and Thursday, October 20th at Isaacs Auditorium at Susquehanna University, 6 to 8 p.m. I can find more information about this if it isn't on the Evangelical Community Hospital, evanhospital.com. It certainly will be as this date approaches. And Caring Choices website has some information.
Yes.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much, Cindy, for coming in.
Thank you, Mark.
I do appreciate it.